Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Just recently, I watched a documentary about food and how we produce it here in America and how it all started back with the fast food industry of the 1950s. To realize that pretty much everything that we eat, at least on a mainstream level, whether you get it from a supermarket or a drive-through greasy spoon, seems to come from a single element known as corn. Just imagine that. It's even gotten to the point now that we farm raise our fish, according to this documentary, and we're teaching fish how to eat corn. So then the question lies, if we become what we eat, then what is with all this magnificent, huge, wonderful world of diseases that seem to be onslaughting everybody here in our society today? Cancer has never been at an all-time high as we've been seeing. It's more of an epidemic now than just a happenstance or a weird curiosity that happens. Schizophrenia is another one that seems to be there on the horizon. ADD, ADHD. What is it? Is it going on? Is it our food that's causing these problems? Today we're going to be exploring these particular kinds of questions and see what kind of answers that we can come up with. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today, our guest started her culinary career in 1973 at a tiny vegetarian restaurant. She's here today with a new book, Cuisine for Whole Health, Recipes for a Sustainable Life. And I'd like to welcome our guest today to the Beyond 50 radio program, Polly Halstead. And Polly, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you. And you certainly started off everything with topics that are at the top of everyone's list. Our national health issues, cancer, schizophrenia, and all the problems with brains that we're having right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's really alarming, too, to realize that it was because of the new food industry that we began to change how food is grown, how it's prepared, how it's packaged, and even how it's served. I was just thinking with Thanksgiving coming up, one of the things that I have always found appalling is somebody who puts on the Thanksgiving table Grandma's secret recipe for candied yams, and I'm thinking, don't you think there's just a little too much sugar going on here?
What are you talking about? I grew up on candied yams. Well, yes, definitely, and there are many good alternatives to candied yams. One thing that we eat a lot of these days is this Japanese kabocha squash, which has a very rich pumpkin-y flavor, and you just cut it in half, put it face down in the oven and bake it, and then scoop it out and mix a little butter, salt, and pepper in there. You don't have to add any extra sugar, and it tastes fantastic.
Now, let's talk about how we raise our food today and why it's so different than a good, sustainable whole cuisine for whole health.
Well, for one thing, a major problem that we're facing globally today is that our soils have been stripped of their nutrients by growing grains in monocrops, so that even the animals that we're eating who eat the grains that we're feeding them commercially are not getting the nutrients in their meat and milk and eggs either. So then when we eat those products, we are not getting the nutrients ourselves. So we're all kind of nutrient deficient right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you talk about in your book, in fact, the first good portion of the book talks about just basically how our food is raised. You know, basically you have a food mantra here, and it really gets kind of even philosophical in many ways to get us to really start thinking about what we start putting into our mouths and to really kind of change the course of the direction of how food is actually produced here, especially in the United States. You know, and when you talk about grain-fed, for instance, chickens, pigs, cows, and even fish, you realize that that's just very unnatural for the animals.
Yeah, actually, grains are very hard on the digestive systems, and they are hard on our digestive systems as well. But cows and ruminants are not genetically designed to eat grains. They're designed to eat grasses. So when they do eat grains, it causes their whole digestive systems to ulcerate.
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening, and that's why they are giving them antibiotics and other drugs, is to try to keep this ulceration down until they get to slaughter. It's really kind of a torturous thing to do to these animals.
Yeah, especially on those large agro-mega farms that I was experiencing, and a couple of different documentaries about food production. You think, what can we do about that? But then that's why Cuisine for Whole Health came on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, I just want to mention that if these grains are ulcerating the digestive systems of the cows, they also are doing the same thing to us. We don't realize that all of our gut problems and then the subsequent problems with our brain comes from the problems in digesting these grains. They're not as digestible as we think they are.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also talk about in your book about your own mother who in 1952 started having an onset of Alzheimer's disease, or not Alzheimer's, schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Oh, that was pretty interesting there. Talk about how you came to discover how that came about.
Well, I didn't know what caused the schizophrenia my entire life. I've been studying a lot of psychology in the search for what was that? What made her get the schizophrenia? Because she had it for the rest of her life. It's such a disabling disease, and it affects the entire family when it happens. But my mom had a genetic condition called pyroluria, which makes vitamin B6 and zinc bind to the pyrroles, and then those nutrients are excreted through the urine. So your body is never, it's always eliminating those two nutrients, and those are particularly brain nutrients. So I have the pyroluria, and I have to supplement my diet for the rest of my life with additional vitamin B6 and zinc. But a lot of brain problems are due to vitamin B6 and zinc loss as well. Mm-hmm. So it's good to be tested for this if you're having, these problems.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about, you were talking earlier about cows and that they're normally grazing, grass grazers. What is the definition of a grass-fed and pastured animal?
Okay, and this is something that's really important for people to get the difference, is that grass-fed and pastured animals have been raised their entire life on their mother's milk or completely grass-fed from birth to slaughter, and they have not been fed any grains at all. In commercial feedlot situations, they start out on grass, but then they do a finishing process where their last months are spent fattening on the grains. And so when you want to buy grass-fed in the store, you specifically have to mention that you don't want the animal finished on any grains at all. There's a little cheating going on right now, but the American Grass-Fed Association is fairly soon going to have a certified stamp on grass-fed meat, so you'll know it's entirely grass-fed.
Well, now, that's fine, but then you seem to have something like the FDA that's supposed to be protecting us, but yet they seem to have people that run their boards and their, inspections who happen to be part of the whole, I guess, if you will, problem in the first place.
Oh, yeah, I don't feel like the FDA has been protecting us ever.
Yes, they would make us believe if it's FDA approved, that must be good for me.
It's all about money. Follow the money, as the saying goes, and so what we're going to have to do is become very proactive about our food choices and demand that we want all these preservatives and all this junk taken out of the food, and just plain not buy it anymore. Buy exclusively unadulterated food. And, those food manufacturers, so what if they go out of business? They're only in business to make a profit. They don't care about our health.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the interesting things, as I was mentioning the documentary earlier that I had watched, was the fact that as Walmart stepped in to say, we want to go completely organic, and I don't know how well that's going, that because they're so large, they're actually kind of changing the scape of how food is produced, especially in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, demand. And as soon as we all demand unadulterated food, exclusively grass-fed and organic food, that's what's going to happen. I'm waiting for some of these products to show up in Costco too.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the holidays and healthy cooking and things like that. What we should keep in mind as we do this.
Okay, our main problem is our overconsumption of, I would say, refined foods, refined flours and sugars, grains. So what we want to try to do is switch over and have more non-starchy vegetables in our holiday meal. I know we all like the stuffing and the candied sweet potatoes and all that, but if we can make alternate choices for those things, also to consume less alcohol. Alcohol is very high in sugar, and when you add up the grains that you're going to be eating, the potatoes, which convert easily to sugar in the system, and the alcohol, you're really asking your body to do much more than it can possibly put up with, and you're going to gain weight. So let's stick to the vegetables. And on my website, I have a recipe for a wonderful roasted chicken, but you can make this the same way with turkey, and it has all these roasted vegetables in the recipe, which are wonderful. So I would say that's an alternative to eating a lot of mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, and stuffing.
Absolutely. I like, as I was reading through your book again, it's not only just a mixture of being a cookbook, but it's also a mixture of a philosophy and a truth as far as what it means to be healthy, because you truly are what you eat. And one of the things that I thought was really neat, and it brings up an interesting subject about food, is your pantry. And it says, in your pantry, love. The most important ingredient for your pantry is love. Be sure to keep a lot of it on hand. It is our love of cooking and feeding our families and ourselves that is the true nourishment. And when I read that, I thought, it is so true. And when you take a look at our kids today, they just sometimes don't seem like they even want to bother with the kitchen unless they're about ready to put something in their mouths. It's like cooking is one of those things that they tend to think, I just don't want to be bothered with that. Just let me know when dinner's ready. And I think, do you realize what you're missing, that love of cooking and being in the kitchen, the kind of magic that it brings for a person?
Yes, and as parents, a lot of us have gotten away from that joy of cooking, so we're not teaching it to our children. And I think it's really fundamental to teach both the boys and the girls how to cook, but also what nutritious food looks like and tastes like. Our palates have gotten really used to the oil and the salt and the sugar all mixed together, and so we're kind of addicted to those flavors, those fast food flavors. But we have to, really train our children from a very early age that it's the natural flavors in things that are so wonderful, so they get used to that at a really early age.
And you're so right. I know, as I explain to people how I like to cook, is very rarely do I use any seasonings or spices. From time to time I might, but I like to know, how does a food taste? Let's take a zucchini, for instance. You taste a zucchini, and then you taste, say, something like a tomato, and then there's an onion. And you think, well, now how can I combine these flavors together in a natural way so they stand out, but at the same time create a whole new experience in and of itself? And I find that when you start cooking and preparing and eating meals that way, that it's easy to drive by those drive-through restaurants. That even going to a restaurant sometimes just isn't as tasty as it used to be.
Oh, well, it isn't, and it's not as good for you either, because you don't have any control over the kind of oils they use, or the the kind of meats or fish they're buying, or anything. And if you're really dedicated to your own health, you'll want to stay at home and eat the things you picked out yourself.
Absolutely. Now, I know the big thing that's missing in a lot of our diets, too, are green foods. Can you describe what that is?
Beg your pardon, are grain foods?
Green foods.
Oh, green foods. Oh,
Green
yeah.
foods. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, we're big on Brussels sprouts right now with grass-fed butter, and also the broccolini. We love that. Spinach. We have big salads every night with another kind of green vegetable. So we're always trying to get more green vegetables into our daily meals here at home, and also supplementing with one of the powdered green drinks. I mentioned several in my book, but everybody has their favorite, and to make a smoothie every day. And this would be good for the kids, too, to get the extra green nutrients in. Make a smoothie every day with some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. What I also like, too, about the titles of some of your recipes here in the book is just things you wouldn't think of. For instance, Long Meadow Ranch grass-fed meatloaf.
Yeah, well, my son-in-law used to manage the Long Meadow Ranch herd. That's how I know about those cows. They're hairy little beasts. So I got that recipe from the ranch.
Very good. I know it was about a year or so ago that we had an opportunity to stay on a sustainable farm, if you will, and I started reading the person there had a cookbook, and it was really kind of a lot in line with sort of what yours is, but it talks about like the history of foods. And one of the things that I found fascinating was how, like, I remember in the 70s as a kid, even growing up into the 80s, they were saying, for good heart health, avoid eating eggs because of cholesterol. And yet in this book that I was reading, it said quite the opposite, that it was one of the most nutritional single elements of food that you can have, just depending on how it was produced.
That's exactly right. And there's a really good book called Eat Fat, Lose Fat by Sally Fallon and Mary Innick, and they specifically talk about cholesterol. Our bodies and brains need good dietary cholesterol. Our heart needs the cholesterol from the egg yolks and the animal fats. This is what we evolved on. We evolved on cholesterol.
Yeah, as you're listening to TV and radio.
It's been getting a really bad rap for a while, but we absolutely need it in our diet.
Well, I think what's so interesting about that is that you would listen to our conventional messages out there about diet. It seems every other week somebody's got a new diet fad or something out there telling us or promising us the fountain of youth and great health. But then as you step back and you just take a look at these messages in general, you realize, why are they clouding and confusing such a simple issue?
I don't know. I mean, if we evolved eating hunted animals and fish and nuts and eggs and seeds and stuff, those are the basic building blocks of our evolution. So why not keep it simple? We know what has worked for 2.6 million years.
Yeah. That is until major networks came along and decided to change it. Exactly. Now, when it comes to the holidays, you were talking earlier about trying to keep carbohydrate consumption to a minimum. So what are some ways we can do that? Would we just kind of maybe replace those with, like, more vegetables, things like that?
Well, actually, what has worked for me, because I found out last spring I was hypoglycemic, is upping my dietary fat intake, because the dietary fats, for instance, in grass-fed butter, whipping cream, the good animal fats, those are what are going to satisfy you, so you don't get the carbohydrate cravings. It took me 3 months of carbohydrate cravings to get off my addiction to sugar, but it really will work. You have to up the good fat content in your diet. And so read the book, Eat Fat, Lose Fat. That really is a great book if you really want to understand the way these fats work.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's really neat, too, for the listeners out there, the book is Cuisine for Whole Health, Recipes for a Sustainable Life. Our guest, Polly Halstead, is that in your book, Polly, is that you have so many recipes that seem to really run the gamut of cultural diversity.
Well, I've been living in the Bay Area for 40 years. We have a really wonderful, eclectic stew pot of people and all different kinds of cuisine. So I really like to mix it up, and I love spicy food. So I just incorporated a lot of those ethnic foods into the cookbook that I know. See, everybody goes out to eat once a week for the Thai food. Or they'll do the Mexican thing, but you can make all that stuff at home now that you have my book and you don't have to leave the house. Plus, it's fun. It's fun to cook these things.
Well, I agree with you, and it's also about tapping into what we have naturally that so few people tend to do, and that's tap into your creativity. And that's the fun part about being in the kitchen is, gaining the confidence through just practice, but then also gaining that little touch of magic when you become creative about putting things together, realizing, I would have never thought about doing something like that before, keeping it simple, in other words.
Yeah, it's so true. And when our kids see that, wow, I can really make the beef satay. It's a real revelation. I mean, they'll love it. Kids love to be in the kitchen and learn these things. They really do. Both my kids are really good cooks.
Very good. Now, talk about some of your favorite recipes here in the book and why they stand out for you. I mean, they're all so good. It's hard to say which one's better than the other, but.
Oh, gosh. I did put all my favorites. But what I think I'd like to do, because one of the things, with all the parties going on, and maybe people are going to have parties at their house, and what kind of hors d'oeuvres could they pick that don't have to go on a piece of bread, a cracker, or some kind of bread thing. So I have a lot of hors d'oeuvres in there, like the party nut mix, the roasted garlic, the toasted goat cheese, the smoked trout pate. All these things don't require any additional carbohydrate vehicle to put them on. So I would say you can do a party that is going to be nutritious and nutrient dense. So the hors d'oeuvre section is great for that. Following the turkey, you always want to know what to do with the turkey leftovers, and I have a great recipe for a wild rice and turkey salad with dried cranberries in mint. That would be the perfect thing for the next day, and probably better than having the turkey sandwich.
Yeah, on processed white bread or wheat. Bleached flour.
Right. Well, you know what? I probably eat maybe 2 or 3 slices of sprouted grain bread a week now. I mean, I used to have a sandwich every day. So, you just change the way you do things. You put the turkey on lettuce and make a salad out of it instead.
Yeah, I'm still a burger fan though, and I like the bun, but I guess I just want to go with more of a full grain bun than I would the typical stuff that you'd find by a big manufacturing bakery. Yeah, exactly.
Well, did you see my recipe with the photo for the burger with the butter lettuce bun?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, look through the book because it looks exactly like a hamburger, and it's just in 2 pieces of butter lettuce, and then I made the roasted tomato ketchup. Oh, you have to make the roasted tomato ketchup. It's fantastic. But anyway, yeah, you can have your hamburger without the bread bun. But there's a great photo in there.
Now tell us, Polly, as people listen and they say, okay, well, I typically go to an average supermarket, it could be any one of the big ones that we've become familiar with over the decades. Where would people begin to shop, and how should they shop for their food so they can get it as whole and as organic as they can, instead of going into an aisle and then seeing a label that says, we're organic, naturally processed, and then, well, that's not totally the truth, so to speak, how we can navigate away from those kinds of things.
Okay, the best way to navigate, if you're not sure, is don't buy anything in a package.
There you go.
it's just bound to be fraught with danger. But I would say, yes, stick to your fresh foods that you get in the produce section. Your grass-fed meat, which is now showing up in Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, and other stores. It's hard to find totally pastured chickens. I keep looking, but you can get most of these things at the farmers market. I know it's becoming winter and some of the farmers markets are closed, but still you can get your grass-fed meats from local purveyors. You can find them on the web by going to the American Grass-Fed Association website, and you'll be able to find people who raise these chickens and have these eggs and meats at ranches really close to you. We have them right around here in Walnut Creek, and you can buy from them directly from your producer. That's the best way. It's the cheapest way too, if you want to save some money.
Do you see that people are starting to become more sustainable when it comes to their own food supply more than ever before, let's say?
Say that again?
I was saying, in your experience, do you find that people are becoming more sustainable about their direct responsibility of their food supply than they ever have been, say in the past 30, 40 years?
Well, people are becoming a little more aware of it, but I have to say, all of us are still in the habit of buying prepackaged foods. It's a habit that's hard to break, and so it's really important now to pay attention to what we're buying and the additional waste in the packaging, all that stuff that we have to throw away that goes to the dump. It's becoming a real problem environmentally for us. But also when we choose the grass-fed meat and the pastured products, we are eliminating eating meat or purchasing meats that are being fed all those antibiotics which run off into the environment and stuff. So all the food choices that we make really impact the environment, not only our bodies, but the environment. That's what we have to think about.
Very good. Well, it's always a pleasure to have people just like you who are out there saying, this is a way we can go look at just the benefits of it. It's not just because you feel healthy, but you prevent yourself from sicknesses, diseases, and even, as we were talking about earlier in the program, mental disorders that we used to think were more coming from the inside, but as you came to realize it's more coming from the outside and how we can prevent all this. And the book is titled, it's Cuisine for Whole Health, and we're talking with Polly Halstead. And tell us, is there a website people can go to find out more about this?
Yes, just go to my website, www.cuisineforwholehealth.com. You'll read some articles that I've written there, and I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving and tries a couple of the recipes out of the book.
There's a lot of good ones, too. Well, Polly Halstead, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you very much.
You bet. So happy Thanksgiving, and make sure that if it's a happy one, that it's a healthy one as well. You want to feel buoyant, not ready for the couch to sleep during a ball game. We also want to thank the listeners out there for joining us, as well as our following sponsors for making this program possible. ZRT Laboratory. If you're suffering from hot flashes, foggy thinking, sudden weight gain, low libido, mood swings, and other effects of aging, ZRT Laboratory, the forerunner in hormone testing, is your first step toward ending troublesome symptoms. Simply visit them online at www.zrtlab.com to find out how their home collection kits can help detect and correct hidden hormone imbalances. Let testing be your guide to symptom relief and life-changing solutions that begin with you. I want to thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program, along with our guest, Polly Halstead. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Also visit us at our blog, where we archive our shows and have great resource information for you to use, as well as send to friends and loved ones as well. We again thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Remember, live your day past halfway.